I'm really excited to introduce this next group. We have Dusan Matuska, we have John Dennehy, D++, Seb Bunney, Ella Hough is going to be moderating. So put your hands together and welcome this next panel.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Very excited for this panel. Just to start, panelists, I'd love if you all could just give a brief intro of who you are, what you do, just to make sure the audience knows all the great work you're doing. Dee, I'm sorry, Dee.
Sure. Hi, I'm D++. I am a Bitcoin educator. I've been a Bitcoiner for 10 years now. And I'm hoping that all of you guys stick around because after this panel, I'm actually going to get into it and we're going to do a hands-on Lightning workshop where you're all going to learn what it means to be a Lightning node runner. And if anybody has any questions about, say, Bolt 12 reusable offers, you've come to the right place. We're going to do all of that today after this panel, so stick around.
Hey guys, my name is Seb Bunney, and I founded Looking Glass Education, which is an educational platform that's kind of built for the layperson, breaking down finance and Bitcoin for the average individual by removing a lot of the jargon. And then on top of that, I'm the author of The Hidden Cost of Money, where I basically just dive into how money weaves its influence into every single aspect of our lives. And then lastly, I just joined a company called Block Rewards, and we deal with pensions, benefits, payments, you name it, in Bitcoin, and we're based out of Canada.
Hey guys, my name is John Dennehy. I'm the founder of Mi Primer Bitcoin, or My First Bitcoin. We're a Bitcoin education nonprofit in El Salvador. So we like to say El Salvador is the focus, the mission is the world. We believe that independent, impartial, community-led Bitcoin education will change the world, and we're trying to create a template to share that with everyone. For the rest of the conference, we're actually co-hosting, along with Looking Glass and Amity Age, a stage about learning Bitcoin called Learning Bitcoin. So stop by and check us out there too as well. Thank you.
And hi guys, my name is Dusan, and I'm a Bitcoin educator from Slovakia. My background is in teaching. I was teaching mathematics, physics, and English. And right now we founded Amity Age, which is a Bitcoin education company. We are doing Bitcoin mining to finance education. We have Bitcoin Academy in Honduras on the Roatan Island, the pirate island of Caribbean. And we are running 3-day Bitcoin educators academies across various countries, piloted in Slovakia, Salvador, and right now we plan Germany, Czech Republic, Hungary, and other countries.
Thank you so much, everybody. So this session, we're really going to look at how can we scale education at the university and country levels, but a critical piece that I hope we can talk about is how do we foster Bitcoin education communities. And so you all are all doing it at different levels, and we kind of like to work small to large. So Seb, would love to start with you. You have a very interesting approach kind of on Bitcoin education in the home and in parenting, and so I'd love for you to speak on that, and especially because the conference has done such a wonderful job of kind of putting a family emphasis. So thank you, Seb.
For sure. So I think one of the most challenging things about Bitcoin and just money in general is that we sometimes struggle to understand how money really does influence so many different aspects of our lives. And so one of those aspects that I think is really profound is how it impacts our relationships. And so for me personally, I was raised by a single mum, and I realized how she had to go out and work to be able to put food on the table and a roof over our heads for my two brothers and I. And that obviously impacted her ability to be able to meet my two brothers and I and our emotional needs. So already you're starting to see our monetary environment shapes our relationships. Now, when it comes to Bitcoin, I think all of a sudden we have the potential to revolutionize our relationships because we have a currency that can capture technological advancement, capture growth and innovation in our purchasing power. So over time, rather than our currency's purchasing power falling, like what we've experienced with fiat currency, it's the inverse. Because we have a fixed supply, our purchasing power can increase over time, which gives us more capacity to build relationships, more capacity to look after those that we love. And I think it's profound how Bitcoin can basically alter the environment around us. And so, kind of back to your question, I think it's really important to talk about Bitcoin on all of these different levels. And I think relationships are incredibly important. Now, when it comes to actual education and speaking to loved ones, speaking to those around us about Bitcoin, I think that it's really important to first, rather than diving straight into Bitcoin, because that's going to usually bring up a lot of aversion, first understand people's pain points. You can't give someone a solution until you actually define the problem. So understand what people are struggling with in society, understand how they view the world, then break down the problem, and then finally, only after that, can we actually start offering a solution. And so for Bitcoin education, for me, and I'm sure for Amity Age, and for John and D++, we're usually trying to understand people's perspective and then give them a tailored educational approach.
No, thank you, Seb, so much for sharing that. And Dee, maybe we'll turn to you. You're just a master educator. I know I really turned to you at how to explain complex topics in a simple way, and you've taught at universities and workshops. So do you think the Bitcoin tools in existence are suitable for newcomers coming to learn about Bitcoin? And on that note, what are some best practices that you've learned in all the different areas of educating?
Wow, that was a lot.
Oh, we can break it down. I'll tell you the second
Well,
one.
I think we need more education. So obviously, I'm very bullish on education, and I think we need more education for everyone, from noobs who are non-technical to even programmers as well. And so I'm doing my part, but I'm just one person, and so I have to get it out to people like Jimmy Song and Lisa Nighet, right, who have gone into the weeds, they've gone into the trenches, and they have dug through the very verbose documentation of the Bitcoin improvement proposals themselves, as well as the code in Bitcoin Core. And they've deciphered it and boiled it down into what is now an incredible educational course. So I couldn't recommend more. Base 58, Lisa Nighet, have to plug her, and have to plug Jimmy Song, of course, with his Programming Bitcoin boot camp, as well as now Programming Taproot. And so would love to see more on that front. I'm doing my part also to do developer education. But I think all we need is just more people to get into Bitcoin, and we need more people to become educators. We also need more people to do whatever it is they do best. So a lot of people come up to me and they say, Dee, I want to quit my day job and I want to work in Bitcoin. I want to learn how to code. And if you really truly want to learn how to code, yes, I will hold your hand and we can talk about this, and maybe it's going to be an amazing new career for you. But what I would say is, what have you done over the last couple decades? What have you devoted your life to? Are you a doctor? Are you a lawyer? Are you an accountant? You certainly have talent in some realm. And there's no reason why you can't apply that talent to Bitcoin, right? We need Bitcoiners in every arena of life. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you truly want to learn how to code, coding's amazing. It gives you the most euphoric feeling in the world. But it's not for everyone. So I don't believe that everyone needs to quit their job to become a coder just because they want to work in Bitcoin. I think, again, do whatever it is that you do best and apply that to this field. I could definitely use a Bitcoin accountant, for example, Bitcoin lawyer, Bitcoin estate planning, inheritance planning. We're desperate for these professionals in our space.
Perfect. And maybe to go off of Seb's point about really catering to the pain point, when you are in these workshops and you're leading them, what are the pain points that you're seeing that are very common arising amongst the participants?
Really good question. So I mentioned lean into what you're good at. So where are the UX designers? Show of hands.
Raise your hand.
UI, UX. Okay, so they're few and far between, but you guys are rock stars, and you guys are the ones that are going to help us meet and reach 8 billion people. So I would say that is one of the major pain points. Nerds like me, we can intuit where to click, we can navigate the command line, we can figure it out, but that doesn't scale to 8 billion people. So I do think that we kind of need to get out of our own way, and just because it was hard for us, maybe it was hard for us to navigate how to run our own node. But that doesn't mean the next generation has to suffer just because we suffered. We can make it easier for them, and we can make Bitcoin a better user experience, right? We're still in the 56K dial-up modem era of Bitcoin, which is to say back then, the internet itself was robust. It had existed since the 70s, which of course predated the World Wide Web. But the user experience wasn't there. We're still using dial-up. We didn't have those on-ramps that were robust, and we hadn't yet indexed the web. So when high-speed internet came along and when Google came along and indexed the web, all of a sudden the infrastructure that had already existed for decades now became viable for billions of people. And so we're going to have those moments in Bitcoin over the next few years. And those of you who are working on user experience, you're going to lead the way. We really need you.
No, thank you. And Dee, I think you just brought up the concept of accessibility. And so Dusan, I'd love to turn it over to you because I know you have a quote, I'm paraphrasing, but we need to scale to the next 100 million people. And something that you really focus on is analogies and metaphors and the soft skills in Bitcoin education. So could you touch on that and your comments there?
Yeah, so we in METH, we are kind of having this mission to help 100 million people to get them and open the rabbit hole for them. And we cannot do it alone. We don't want to do it alone. And I love the approach that Me Premier is taking to decentralizing the education. And what I feel like there's a lot of people passionate about Bitcoin, but they don't want where they're going to fit in. Is it the UX? Is it the developer part? And somewhere they feel like education is important, but they feel like, oh, but I'm not the person standing on a stage. I cannot do it. I'm afraid. I can't do public speaking. I'm too technical, or I'm not technical enough. So they have this limiting belief. But I believe everybody of us, although we are sitting here, everybody of people in the audience, I believe we are all micro-educators. We are all influencing in some way our closest ones, our families at the family dinners, our friends, colleagues in a dinners in a companies. And this is also education. So I would love people to find in themselves that they are also educators, not to have a necessity to be on the stage to speak. And this is what we want to help with, like give this spark to Bitcoiners that they can be educators, give them the soft skill tools, how to present better, how to simplify concepts, how to handle objections. We're going to have at 1 p.m. in the Learning Bitcoin, where we are together with Seb and John, we're going to have a session on how to handle objections, which I think is one of the most crucial ones. Because if we're just punching people with better arguments, they're going to switch off and they're not going to listen. But if we handle the objections well, suddenly they open up and they can listen, they can go through these kind of obstacles that they have in their minds relating to Bitcoin. And this is what we would like to do. Bring more educators in a space and give them the soft skill tools and courage to do the education.
I was going to add one more point, which you kind of touched on, Dusan, which I think is really important and a profound point in Bitcoin, which is because Bitcoin is a decentralized currency, there is no marketing department or education department. Ultimately, Bitcoin's success falls on our shoulders as individuals, and that includes everyone in the crowd. So I think it is so important, whether you are talking from the stage or just talking to a friend, we're all doing Satoshi's work. We're all trying to help move Bitcoin forward. And so I applaud anyone who wants to put themselves out there, and I urge you guys to, because we all speak to our own unique cohort of individuals.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for adding that.
Absolutely. So maybe John and Dusan, you could both answer this question in a sense, but Dee's mentioned we don't have enough Bitcoin educators. So what is the pathway if someone knows nothing about Bitcoin and then they, learn more, and how do they become an educator? Do you see, a need in your communities as well?
I think I would like John to start because what they are doing with Bitcoin Diploma and the network is amazing. So I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, thank you. So great question. First, you have to become educated yourself, right? Before you could teach others, you have to learn yourself. And I think what happens, what we've seen, so just to rewind a little bit, in El Salvador, we teach a 10-week program, the Bitcoin Diploma, and some of the students that go through that, so it's meant to take people from 0 to 1, essentially, right? So the first half of it is what's wrong with money, what's wrong with the world, and the second part is the solution, which is Bitcoin. So everybody starts when they take this course at 0. Most of our teachers were students in El Salvador, right? So in 2022, they were a student of the Bitcoin Diploma. In 2023, they were teaching it. A really great example is at one of the first high schools that we taught it at, one of the first public high schools in the world to have this education. He graduated high school that same year. His name is Gerardo. And now he is literally still at the same high school, but he's teaching his teachers so that they could teach their own students and spread that. So I think the step one is you yourself has to be educated. And then, you educate enough people and a certain % of them will just really get it and really want to share that.
No, thank you. And John, maybe as a follow-up, we were speaking the other day and you highlighted a really important distinction in education about making sure the education you provide is empowering and you're not just dictating a topic. And so could you expand on that and maybe also share for the audience, when you're sharing Bitcoin information, how can you make sure you're empowering and not dictating or forcing an idea?
Yeah, excellent. So I think Bitcoin education as a whole is underappreciated, right? It's so important. It's our best defense and our best offense. But further than that, I think there's a specific type of Bitcoin education that is what we should be striving for, and that is independent and impartial education. Because, you know, I talked about the problem and then the solution being Bitcoin. I think the problem is that we have moved away from having agency in our own lives. We have moved away from being able to define our own destiny and think for ourselves. And the solution is Bitcoin because it changes the incentive structure and it incentivizes us to think for ourselves, which makes us think further into the future, build, plan. It changes everything. So it's so important that we keep that in mind when we are teaching about Bitcoin to these early, especially to people who are just getting into it, that if the end goal, Bitcoin is a means, it is not the end. Bitcoin education is a means, it is not the end. So the end is freedom, the end is liberation. And if that is our goal, then we need to be careful to not dictate to students, this is what you should think. It doesn't matter that it's Bitcoin. They should still come to their own conclusions. We can't dictate to students, we must allow them to come to their own conclusions because that is the point of all of this, right? That they think for themselves. And that is what sets off this chain of events, the second order effects, third order effects. So what we do is we try to, you know, rather than say this wallet is the wallet that you should use to our students, there's a tool, I think it's on bitcoin.com or bitcoin.org, that has choose your wallet. So it's like, it's a checklist, right? This wallet is good for this, bad for that, good for this, bad for that. What do you need it for, right? So we just try to provide, I mean, it's harder, to be honest, right? You have to provide a lot more information. It's not just wallet A is what you should use. It's wallet A is good for X, Y, and Z, bad for X, Y, and Z. Wallet B is this, and you have to give them a lot more information. So it goes slower, but it's slow is smooth is fast, right? If we really want to change the world, that's how we're going to do it.
I think you've touched on an interesting point there with scaling education. Maybe it's kind of scaling values and how you embrace new ideas and new topics. So I think for me, curiosity was really important. And so this is a question for all of you. But before we even talk about Bitcoin, you know, when we have young students or families, just anyone, what values should we talk about? Or concepts like creativity, curiosity? I'd love for your opinions on that. Just maybe start with D and then we'll move down the line or chime in whenever.
Can you repeat the question? So
okay.
How do we engage?
Yeah.
Is it how do we engage people before we breach the topic of Bitcoin?
So maybe just a primer before.
Okay.
So for me at least, I really didn't understand Bitcoin until I had taken a class on creativity and creative destruction and curiosity and new ideas. And I think that was really crucial for me being open to what is not, you know, the social accepted standard. And so when you are talking to students or just in your own journeys, what do you think are important skills that we should really try to foster in schools, in family units, so that people just are open-minded to the idea of Bitcoin? And not to make the question more complicated, but I think there's a difference between Bitcoin, the asset, and the network, which then, D, to your point, takes everyone. And I can repeat that again.
No, that question just kind of broke my brain a little bit because I've always been an outsider and I've always had the ability to think critically and think independently. And I didn't know that that was a skill that could be taught. So I would defer to you and I would want to know what that class was and how we can replicate it because I think that sounds incredible.
Well, I'll give a little bit then. So it was a class, I think it was just called Creativity. I can't even remember the name now. But it was a semester-long class, and the instructors, we had readings, but the idea is you pick a creator and you study them. So you take concepts like creativity through combination, and you just apply it to how that person runs their business or, you know, how they run their architecture firm, whatever it might be. And so for me in school, growing up, it's okay, you know, this is the prescribed path of what you should do. These are the concepts in the textbook, kind of just take and receive and memorize. And so until I took this class on creativity, I was of the mindset that, oh, I'm not creative. If I'm not artistic, I'm not creative. I can't, you know, have a real original idea.
I get it now. Yeah, I get
yeah.
it. And I think I could relate this back to a quote from Tim Burton, who, of course, is the master creator director. He said famously that if he would have set out to be a director, that's never where he would have ended. Probably for the reason that you're describing, is he would have gotten stuck in the bureaucracy of academia, which unfortunately can be a killer of creativity sometimes, which I think is so tragic, right? So me as an educator, what I try to do is I try to foster that childlike sense of wonder and joy. And I'm really hoping that everybody sticks around, because we're hopefully going to have some of that swirling amongst us in a few minutes when we're sending and receiving sats over Reg Test, which is about as fun as you can have sober, in my opinion.
Yeah, so Seb, maybe just, do you have, I can clarify the question for you as well, but do you have a thought on what value we should really try to, you know, not force again, but highlight?
It's interesting, when I think about education, traditionally, a lot of the traditional academia, the approach to education has been very linear. And I think that when it comes to Bitcoin, it doesn't work super well when we approach Bitcoin very linearly. That's a hard word to say. Anyway, the way that I think Bitcoin really excels is the fact that it really does touch on every single aspect of society. It touches on our environmental issues because it gives us the ability to save as opposed to consume. It touches on politics because it removes money from state. It touches on parenting because it gives parents a way to save, supporting their ability to meet their child's emotional needs. Like, it touches on so many different areas of our life. So I think what really is up for grabs in Bitcoin education is the fact that if we can make a more dynamic learning journey, a way to be able to educate people from their own perspective in areas that they're interested in, I think that's how we're going to orange pill millions more people. I think the challenge with maybe taking Bitcoin to traditional academia is we try to teach a linear path. And that linear path, it works well with many different subjects because they're very siloed. But Bitcoin isn't like that. Bitcoin touches so many different instances. So I think what's really important about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin community, given that we're a decentralized community, is, again, to share our own experiences and put together our own information because, again, we speak to a unique cohort of individuals.
Yeah, thank you, Seb.
Yeah, so great question. I think that Bitcoin is our teacher. Bitcoin is my teacher. I think it's all of our teachers. And it incentivizes certain behavior. So I don't think that we have to, nor should we, say that you should take personal responsibility. Bitcoin demonstrates that, right? We don't have to say that you don't need to ask permission. You could go and do it, right? The permissionless nature of Bitcoin demonstrates that. So much of what I want to see in the world, Bitcoin already embodies. And Bitcoin incentivizes that behavior, encourages it, right? Like, and it's real. It's proof of work is such a wonderful system because that's not the world that we live in. We don't live in a world where work, your input is the only thing that matters. It matters like where you were born, how old you are, who you voted for, all those things. The system is biased. Every system is biased. So I don't think we need to push anything other than Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin itself will not dictate, but it will incentivize certain values, and by and large, those are the values that if I was pushing something, then it would be those same values.
Yeah, no, I love that because, I didn't know what low time preference was or proof of work before I found Bitcoin, and that's had a huge impact on my life. So please.
I would add on what the guys and Dee said. There are two things that what I feel that brought me into Bitcoin and helped me to appreciate it more. And it's the topic of entrepreneurship and time management. On a university, I was teaching classes on that because before Bitcoin, we started a startup and training kids on how to become more entrepreneurial. And when we talked about entrepreneurship, it was very interesting to see and talk about value creation and like really what it means. And then when you create value, like what happens after it? Like how much of that value is taken by somebody who just claims that, oh, this is what I need from your value to run my government. And suddenly like the kids, when they were doing their own business plans and like this goes for taxes, suddenly they start to question like, okay, so what's the fair amount? And so this opened up a question of like creating value, and this is my time that I put into, and then who takes this time, this energy, and what they do with that. So this was a topic that brought me to Bitcoin as well. And the other was the time management thing, like how to treat your time, how to kind of put the time to things that matters, they're important. And I love the book, the Bitcoin Money book. I don't know if you read that one. It's a super short book, 15 minutes of reading, but they're amazing, crucial lecture in the end. There's a sentence says like, our time and energy is limited, and we shouldn't be trading this for money that anybody can create out of whim and that's not limited. And this, when we go to schools and read this book with kids, this part in the book just opens up so many questions into like, okay, so what is money, how money works, and which money should be, like should money be limited, there shouldn't be. And this brings so many people into Bitcoin, just this kind of realization of trading limited thing for something unlimited. So this is, the answer is like these two things, entrepreneurship, value creation and time management is what brought me as well into Bitcoin and the kids that I see.
Thank you so much. So speaking more on the community level now, and if our goal is how do we foster these communities, you know, it can't always be easy. There's not people that are just initially open-minded to learning about all of this. So what are some tips that you have when you're going into a new area, a new community to talk about Bitcoin, and you have some people who are maybe pretty skeptical or think, no, I know better. You know, how do you respectfully handle that and really, you know, follow the timeline that they'd like to go on, but still be a resource? And I don't know if we want to start with Dee or whoever can just chime in.
I think you show them, right? As much as possible, we try to follow show, don't tell. Especially with new people, especially for people with these concerns. There are valid concerns, but most of the time you could break that down like, well, Bitcoin's for other people, like I'm not a tech expert. Okay, just download this app, I'll send you some sats. And they're like, oh, I just got Bitcoin, I just used Bitcoin? Okay, I could do this, right? It is almost always easier than people think, right? There's layers to it, and you could get really deep down the rabbit hole, but to begin, it is almost always easier than people think. It is almost always different than what people think. So to show them and actually demonstrate, like, and look, see this transaction, I could see it. Anybody could see this. It's the transparency of the ledger, right? You could demonstrate that much easier than you could explain the theory. I think especially for those people that are unfamiliar and have those concerns, show them.
We do a lot of gamification on the classes when we teach Bitcoin Diploma in Honduras. All the classes are very based on games, interactions, so we created some games around kind of kids mining with the dices and sending transactions. We use macaroni, like the little, macaroni as a money, and the kids are training how barter works, how commodity money works. And suddenly they have so many questions after the game. So we play a game and then we do debriefing. And this is kind of what sticks with them because they remember the game on the next class and I can relate to it later. I love the app called Wiser. And that's an amazing gamified, like a Duolingo on Bitcoin. So each kid then downloads the app, and I did some weekly competitions. So whoever had the most points after the week, they received some sets to their Blink wallets. So the gamification, some rewards, it works marvelous.
I was going to add one more point, which both you guys kind of touched on, which is I think when it comes to education, actually interacting with Bitcoin makes an immense kind of leap in their progress. And I think that for so many of us, we can sit on the sidelines and watch the Bitcoin community grow. We can read all of this technical jargon and never really interact with it. And for me personally, I flew out to Honduras with Dusan back in, I think it was October last year. Living in Canada, there is nowhere to spend Bitcoin. There's nowhere to interact with Lightning. And so I only had, for the first time after years of working in the space, to be able to actually interact with it. And even for me, I was absolutely blown away. And so more than anything, I think it's about, one, meeting the individual where they're at, as opposed to pushing our own beliefs, as John was saying. And two, getting them to interact with it. Open up a Lightning wallet. You can send someone 10 cents. You don't have to send them $100. You can send them 10 cents and get them to send it back to you. So get them interacting with it and meet them where they're at.
That's great. Do you have a tip where I can follow up?
Yeah, no, I think they nailed it. Definitely meeting them where they're at and asking them questions, right? Not everybody thinks that we need to end the Fed. And if they don't, then you've already lost your audience if that's the angle that you're starting off with. Not everybody thinks that inflation is a bad thing. So that already, you might like lose people entirely and they're gonna completely stop listening to you if you tell them that inflation is theft. So maybe there's something else that they might connect with. Maybe it's the borderlessness or the permissionlessness or the unconfiscatability, or there's something that they will connect with, and it might not be what you think. It might not be the reason that you're passionate about Bitcoin, and it might make zero sense to you why they can't see it from your perspective, but that's okay.
Absolutely. So I think, the 21 million Bitcoin are a tool for all 8 billion people. We all came here for a different reason. And so Seb, you brought up, meet people where they're at. So I'd love, where were you all at? Like pre-Bitcoin, what were you doing, and what was that spark or moment that really sent you down the Bitcoin rabbit hole?
So my personal journey, I was a backcountry mountain bike instructor for over a decade, and I absolutely loved it. But what I realized very quickly is that if I want to pursue mountain biking as a career, I'm going to struggle. And I have to have some forms of passive income. I have to have some form of entrepreneurship. Otherwise, it's going to be a very hard life. And so I started investing, and then from my investing rabbit hole, you go down into the gold rabbit hole, and then from gold, you start questioning the monetary system, and that ultimately led me to Bitcoin. And for me, the moment I found Bitcoin, within about 6 months, I'd quit my job, and I'd dedicated full hog into Bitcoin and founded Looking Glass Education to educate. Because I feel as if one thing that Bitcoin was lacking, especially when I was kind of entering the Bitcoin space, was there was just not enough content that spoke to the layperson. There was not enough content that removed a lot of that jargon, and so that was our whole goal. How do we break down education for the average individual? And now we're seeing more and more and more of that, and in other languages, like what these guys are doing. And so, again, I think this community is absolutely incredible, and everyone has a unique journey, and I think it's so important to share that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so pre-Bitcoin for me, I was a social activist, right? So I felt like I was always pushing against something. Started with the Iraq War in 2003, like I tried to slow that down. It didn't work. I ended up getting arrested quite a bit. But I was always trying to slow the bad. Through activism, through social activism, I was always trying to slow the bad. And when Bitcoin came along, I had also, through that, in Ecuador, I had an issue with, was on the wrong side of the revolution, and they seized all my assets too, right? So separation of money and state was very present for me as well. But I was always trying to slow the bad, and then when I first heard about Bitcoin, it clicked as a way to speed the good. And that is such a big difference. And I was wrong, right? Slowing the bad is not an effective strategy. Speeding the good is what we should all be trying to do. And I think that's what Bitcoin does. It speeds the good.
Yeah. That was great.
So I came from a line of entrepreneurship. I started to do like side hustles when I was 16, ordering from China headphones and selling them in Slovakia. Then we started a construction company, construction startup when I was 20. And so I always loved freedom of doing things own way, creating value, and seeing users using our products. We're building outdoor workout parks. When I saw kids playing on that and doing some workout, I felt like, wow, this is gonna, maybe my kids will be working out on that, and I love this approach. And then I also were teaching math, physics. So when I saw kids getting hard concepts, but they felt like, oh, I wasn't born a math guy. I don't have genes for that. But suddenly, after a couple of sessions, the kids went up. Suddenly, they were doing their own exercises at home, and the parents were like, what did you do to them? I was like, it's not me. It's like them. They are doing the proof of work. I fall in love with education. And then when Bitcoin came along, when I understood it, I was like, wow, so this is what I want to do. Just showing people that something that they feel like it's complex, in the end it's easy to grasp when you meet the person where they are and when they touch it, when they touch the technology. So that freedom concept that came from like my entrepreneurial background, that what really got me in.
Dee, I'll pass it to you, or can?
Yeah, sure. I'll just kind of keep this brief. We have a couple minutes left. One last time, I do want to plug
Yes, I was gonna mention
my
it too.
workshop. So I hope you all stick around, because in just a couple of minutes, we're not just going to talk about Bitcoin education. We're actually going to do Bitcoin education. And you're all going to get a feel for what it means to be a Lightning Roadrunner, to manage your own liquidity, to balance your own channels, and to send and receive Bolt 12 offers, which are reusable payment codes that I know you've all been dying to experience firsthand. Just real quick, my Bitcoin journey, my name's D++. C++ was the first language that I learned when I was 14, and so when I learned about Bitcoin around 2012, 2013, my first impression was, somebody made money out of C++? Like, what? It was just weird and crazy and hilarious to me. But I mentioned earlier that I've always been an outsider. I've always had the ability to think critically and think independently, and so I thought it was incredible that somebody made this C++ money, but I didn't need everybody to co-sign and to tell me that it was going to be adopted. I was able to look at it from first principles and say, I'm interested in this. Everyone else hasn't caught on yet, and that's okay.
Absolutely. So we do have just a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we can leave the audience with some tangible tool, tip, resource to be the Bitcoiner in their community. So I'd love if you all can just share, one piece of advice. Dee, you've brought up be the Bitcoiner in your company. Maybe it's a lunch and learn that you host. Just what is that one tip?
Be the Bitcoiner in your community. So
I do company or wherever you're at.
Well, so I do train the trainers. So all the workshops that I do are open source. So the workshop I'm about to do in 2 minutes, if you like it, guess what? You can run one in your own community. And it's really fun.
Awesome. Seb, I'll turn it to you.
Wait, say the question one more time as I was
Yeah,
out.
so just what is one tip for wherever everyone is at, what is one tip that they can do to share Bitcoin in their community? Whatever community they're in, it's their family, their office, whatever it might be.
I would say that it's really easy to feel a bit of an imposter, because you feel like, I've got to know all about UTXOs, I've got to know deep down the technical rabbit hole, I've got to know the philosophy of Bitcoin, I've got to know the economics of Bitcoin. And the reality is you don't. I think that focus on what you're interested in as an individual. And again, we talked about it at the very start, but when we go to educate, find out what someone's pain points are first, then describe the problem, and then you can bring up Bitcoin. Don't just dive straight in and bring up Bitcoin straight off the bat, because it brings up that wall. And so I think it's really important. Just listen to what it is that resonates with you and stay true to yourself, and then focus on the individual, meet them where they're at.
Yeah, so there's so many great Bitcoin education materials, many of them open source that you could use yourself. So go out, find them. The Bitcoin Diploma, open source, myfirstbitcoin.io, you can find it there. And don't wait for anyone to give you permission. Don't wait to get permission from yourself either. You could begin today. The hardest thing is to begin, so take that first step.
I would say to really be a helpful Bitcoin educator for your closest ones, come from the place of humbleness, because and getting to the beginner's shoes again. Because it's the deeper you are in the rabbit hole, the harder it is to get back again to the place where people really enter the Bitcoin. And the more you're going to ask questions, the more patience you're going to have with people, the better it will be and easier it will be for them to enter the rabbit hole. You don't have to have a resource. You just need to be there for them, listen, be patient, and be humble, because we all started with like not knowing anything. And so this is what I would recommend to all of you.
Thank you. Well, Dusan, John, Seb, and Dee, I so enjoyed this. It was a very insightful panel. Thank you to you all. And I think if we just had kind of a one-sentence wrap-up, it's, we all have something to share and add, and we just have to take that first step. So thank you.
Thank you, Ella.
Thank you.